Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday to you. My name is Tim Harris, pastor of Woodburn Baptist Church, and it's 10 o'clock, which means it's time for 10 with Tim. Each day, Monday through Friday, we take 10 minutes and we go verse by verse through the Word of God. We are finishing up the book of Genesis tomorrow. So we're in chapter 50. Genesis chapter 50, we'll do verses 1 to 13 tomorrow, and then we'll finish it out. 1 to 13 today. Finish out the rest of it tomorrow. So if I haven't said it lately, I am so glad you're with me. Thank you for joining me. Those of you who join live, that's special. I know you take time out of your morning every day to meet with me, and I appreciate that. Most of you join me later, though, and I get it. You work. You're busy, but you still try to make time for the Word, and the fact that you join me and we get to do this together means a lot to me. It means the world. It makes me better too. I read closer. And I read more deeply because I know I'm going to end up talking to you about what we read together. So again, thank you. I think it's good to be partners in the Word together. So here we go. This is the burial of Jacob. It's amazing. It really is amazing. This is, I think it would be the longest burial narrative, definitely in the Old Testament. It depends on what you do with the resurrection and the Jesus story in the New Testament. It's just the longest, most elaborate burial story. Jacob and Joseph are the only two people in all of Scripture embalmed. It really wasn't a Jewish custom, and that's the whole thing. They're in Egypt, right? Technically, we would say that they are mummified, which is just, what? But they really are. They are mummified according to Egyptian customs. So let's talk about that. First off, verse 1, just to point out to you, these three gestures of Joseph. When his father dies, he throws himself on his father, he weeps, and he kisses him. Well, that's Joseph's whole thing, right? Those three gestures from the very beginning. You remember when he sees, when Joseph, sees his, brothers, he does this, when he sees Benjamin, same thing, and now here, he doesn't speak so much at the death of his father. He only weeps. And Joseph's just this amazing man of passion. And I love it. Then Joseph, verse 2, notice he tells the physicians who served him to embalm his father's body. He tells the physicians, again, embalming in Egyptian tradition was a religious process. Definitely was a physical process, and it had the effect of protecting the body against decay. And Jacob's body has a long journey back to Canaan, and so that embalming is probably important, but notice how Joseph instructs the physicians. So in other words, there's this layer of separation. It's not the priests, in other words. It's not the Egyptian priests who are overseeing this process. It's the physicians, which again allows Jacob to receive the prestige of a royal Egyptian entombment, while at the same time avoiding the Egyptian pagan religion that would revolve around the afterlife. So I think that's sort of an interesting detail there. So the full Egyptian customs are observed. The 40-day embalming, mummification, and then the 70 days of mourning. It's just really elaborate. But understand, Jacob, though he's only been in Egypt a relatively short period of time, he is accorded this royal wedding, a funeral, this amazing, he dies like a dignitary, and that's important. It's very important. Now, notice from there, Joseph needs Pharaoh's permission to take his father's body back to Canaan, where he can be buried in the tomb at Machpelah, right? With Abraham and Sarah, all of the patriarchs tombed there. But I think it's interesting here in verse 4, Joseph doesn't approach Pharaoh directly. Remember, Joseph's like the vice president. Joseph is one of the few who has this direct access to Pharaoh, but not here. Notice that. He goes through intermediaries to ask if he can have that permission to go. Now, why is that? I think the simple reason is that, especially in the ancient world, if you were in a period of mourning, you were not allowed to walk into the royal chamber. You couldn't go before Pharaoh if you were mourning. Joseph apparently has himself, handled the dead body of his father. And so for that reason, in that state of public mourning, he isn't allowed audience with the Pharaoh. So he sends the word separately, and Pharaoh, of course, grants permission. Again, Pharaoh shows incredible deference to this, Canaanite man, Jacob, this, Hebrew Jewish patriarch. And again, I just want you to pay attention to how long and drawn out this is, that this incredible burial narrative. And so not only does Pharaoh give permission, I mean, it sounds like everybody, all of the leaders, they go with them. There's this amazing Egyptian entourage, so many Egyptians that, when the Canaanites see them out there, they think it's some kind of Egyptian function, It is the sons of Jacob actually burying their father, but there's so many Egyptians in this entourage, Egyptian dignitaries. Do you see that? Now, there's a couple of little signals there that they're coming back, and I don't think we're expected to believe that Pharaoh doesn't trust Joseph, but Joseph is careful to say, I'm going to bury my father and I'll come back. I'm going to bury him and I'll come back. That is emphasized. Pharaoh's not going to want to lose his second in command. And I guess that idea that he's going back to where his family is from, he could, repatriate, is that the word? And so there's this, emphasis on his coming back. And then when they leave the little children in Egypt, which again is a sign that, everybody's coming back. The adults are all coming back. And so they have this amazing funeral procession it's this incredible journey back. They stop at the threshing floor of Atad, and there they mourn for 7 days. That would be the Jewish custom there. That's where the Canaanites see this whole thing. They can hear the mourning. I mean, it's just incredible, loud, crying and weeping and mourning for 7 days. And they actually named that place Abel Mizraim, which means the mourning of the Egyptians, mourning, the grieving of the Egyptians. Again, they give it an Egyptian name because, as I say, they see it as some sort of, Egyptian funeral, which is amazing. So then the last two verses, 12 and 13, emphasis that Jacob's sons had done exactly what was commanded them. They carried his body to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah. And so that's the burial of Jacob. Again, I kind of ask you, why such an elaborate burial? Like, Joseph is probably more important in Egypt, but he's not going to get anything like all that. They're going to bury him, put him in a coffin, stick him in a room. I mean, Joseph doesn't get that kind of burial narrative. When Moses dies, I think like only God attended his funeral. When David dies in the Old Testament, gosh, are we told anything much about his funeral? He got like one of those $10 obituaries in the, Bowling Green Daily News. I mean, he got almost nothing. But Jacob gets this elaborate, that we're told just this elaborate story about his burial. Why do you think that is? Because he's Israel. Remember? In the Hebrew, the name goes back and forth. And most of the time in this narrative, he's called Israel. So when the children of Israel are reading this story, again, this is Israel. And they are seeing the incredible deference, the incredible respect that Egypt pays to Israel. And then when Israel's being buried there, the Canaanites stop and rename the place. So there's this recognition and respect from the Canaanites and the Egyptians, the two enemy nations of the future nation of Israel. Also, as we've been saying all along, it's assumed that Moses writes Genesis as the book to orient the children of Israel coming out of slavery so that they'll know who they are, so that they'll know who their God is, so that they will know their history, right? And so those children of Israel coming back from Egypt out of slavery to just know that Jacob himself, Israel himself, made this same journey, crossing the Jordan and coming into the land of Canaan, that he came in as royalty, that Egypt and the Canaanites all stopped and somehow paid respects to him. You understand what this would mean to the returning slaves of Israel coming out of Egypt. So I think the importance here is that it's Israel. This is the burial of Israel, sort of in some ways the end of an era, the end of this era of the patriarchs. Not completely, but formally, I think you could say that. And so this is the burial of Jacob. His story if you include the Joseph saga, his story, really has taken up most of what we've been reading in the whole book of Genesis. And now he's laid to rest in the cave at Machpelah. For those of you who love history and love Israel today, do a little bit of research. Understand that tomb of the patriarchs, the cave at Machpelah, is to this day one of the two most disputed holy sites in the land of Israel. After the Temple Mount, that tomb of the patriarchs is highly contested and fought over. Muslims and Christians still, Palestinians and Jews still want to take claim to that holy place. It's there, it's still there, and the church mosque structure over the tomb of the patriarchs is actually quite beautiful. So if you're interested, look that up. It is still a place, obviously, and it is very, very much in the news every day there in the land of Israel. So God bless you guys. Tomorrow we'll pick up right there. We're going to finish Genesis tomorrow. We're going to get to the end of the beginning. How's that? Chapter 50, verses 14 to 26. So have a good day today. I'll see you, Lord willing, 10 o'clock in the morning for 10 with Tim. I love you guys. See you tomorrow.